Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle, Desrochers, and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of the Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you, nor would we want to. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, for the contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and the logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre, but does amazing commission pieces of any sort. So tonight, we welcome for the very first time Maria Wheatley, and she's going to be discussing her book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, Ancestral Mysteries and Lost Civilisations. Now, she's the UK's leading authority on earth energies and ley lines that were skillfully incorporated into the megalithic sites. How many times do I say that? There's always a reason. But Stonehenge seems to be the one that everybody's familiar with and everybody has, their own perceptions about. So with that being said, we're going to get a lot of answers this evening. And in order, guys, to participate in the chat, remember we're streaming to 8 different live platforms. Roku TV does not have a chat room, but everywhere else does. And again, we are like, 7 lanes of traffic coming down into like 1. So we will do our best. I will flash up comments every now and then. And please bear in mind, our lovely guests can't see all your comments. And we will put up questions. And so once she's done speaking, because that's what it's all about. It's about our guest, right? Yes.
Amelia. Did you hear that?
No.
Did you hear that? The thunder? You said 5 minutes ago where it
The
was. And it was
Amelia.
literally 20 minutes away from me.
I know.
Yeah. It's literally 25 minutes away from me.
That's wonderful. Here we go. It's going to get exciting. Anyway, I also want to make mention that Maria is here with us all the way from the UK. She's a freaking champion because it's like 2:15 a.m. for her.
I'd never do it. I love her for that.
Oh, gosh. I've done like 4 hours jobbers,
Yeah,
It's like, midnight in the desert. It's just, I think, like 12.
It's 4 hours, right? 12 to 4 or something. Yeah, no.
Oh,
I've said no to everything after midnight because I'm not as good as Michelle.
Turn into a pumpkin, but
no, I just don't think. I know you can carry that show for that long. Yeah. I'd be like,
I know. Yeah. Sometimes you need that long. So
yeah, well, you have enough experience. I don't.
Thank you. Well, without further ado, our lovely guest is here. Hello, everybody. Hang tight. Here we go.
Yay.
Hello.
Hi. Hi. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm very well and waking up.
Yeah. Oh my God. You're a trooper. I don't know if you heard me say it. I've turned down shows after midnight. You're amazing.
And you look ravishing considering it's 2 a.m. Welcome to the Outer Realm officially. Thank you so much for joining us and looking forward to this episode because it's one of those things. I've had friends who visited Stonehenge. I've researched monoliths and so on, and stargates, power spots. I mean, it's just an endless amount of fascinating information. But Stonehenge seems to be the one that everybody knows Stonehenge, but nobody really knows what it's about, why it's there, how it got there, who was responsible, what is it? There seems to be a whole lot of, for some people, missing links. So, where I'd like to start with you is your humble beginnings. I mean, one doesn't just wake up or grow up as a child and say, well, maybe they do grow up as a child, and say, I'm just going to completely dissect Stonehenge and all these other monoliths. So, please tell us about your journey.
Well, my late father was a master dowser, and he was investigating sacred sites worldwide, actually. So I kind of tagged along with him, and I've dowsed now 17 different countries. That, hundreds of megaliths worldwide. And so I've been carrying on the family legacy of looking into the mysteries of ancient sites worldwide.
I think that's fabulous.
Yeah.
So you pretty much did grow up saying, I am going to do this.
Absolutely. And it's been a great journey. So it's been wonderful.
Have they all been fascinating, or is there something that stands out that you always maybe go back to?
I think each country has its own quintessential sites. For example, I love dowsing and interacting with the alchemy house in Prague that the magician John Dee, the Elizabethan magician to Elizabeth I, went to. That was fascinating. Sites in Malta, Egypt, I go to regularly. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in the Great
I love Egypt. Yes. And I never wanted to leave.
I'm in Charco Canyon at the end of August, dowsing ancient America near Four Corners. So I think every site has something to offer humanity in general.
Right.
Oh, we have to bring you to Canada.
But curiosity is, what came first? I believe that many of the ancient, civilizations built on power spots and where ley lines, come together. But some people believe it's the opposite. They believe that, people would build these monuments and it would attract certain types of energy. So I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, it's not just ley lines. That's a kind of misnomer, because they're not necessarily the power in the land. For a power center, you need more than just leys. You need what's called a spiral energy pattern called a geospiral. You need earth energies. You need leys as well. So it's all about having layer after layer of different types of earth energy. It's just that most people have heard about leys, but there is far, far more to that. What most geomancers in the UK feel is that there's these energy spots, especially the massive spiral pattern, which is the harmonic surface pattern of very, very deep water. That's what attracted the ancient peoples to build it. That's what decrees the esoteric center of an ancient site or ceremonial complex. So really, it's layer after layer after layer of different types of earth energy. That's what makes a power center. That came first.
Fascinating. Do you think that we here in the West, do you find that they get shortchanged a little bit? Everybody thinks because the ancient world is just so ancient that it can't possibly be as powerful. And let's say in South America, for example, I know in North America, there's America's, Stonehenge, of course, and then there is, they found a Stonehenge type circle in Lake Michigan that would have been pre-Ice Age. So what are your thoughts on that when somebody says, oh, well, we're not that old, so we can't possibly have all of these incredible things?
Well, we have, and you can go back, up to 10,000 years ago in the UK alone, and there were standing stones then. So what the ancients did in the UK especially, when we go back to that 10,000 years ago in what's called the Mesolithic period, the Middle Stone Age, they were marking ancient sites with a single standing stone. Later, in the what's called the Neolithic period, about 5,500 years ago, they start building around those marker stones. So it was almost like 10,000 years ago, there was a geological survey of the UK, and these power spots, which I said are layer after layer of different types of earth energy, were marked out like an acupuncture point and later built upon.
Wow. So what would attract people to want to be near these places?
When I've investigated some of the Hertzian frequencies of different types of earth energies, they seem to release a frequency round about 7 hertz that puts your brain into alpha mode. It relaxes you, puts you in a meditative state of mind. That's one level. When we come to sites such as Stonehenge, ever since the 12th century, and written by Geoffrey of Monmouth, like I said, in the 12th century, he said, no stone at Stonehenge doth not have healing power. So they were healing places as well, renowned for that. So people used to go to these ancient sites to change their consciousness, to have healing experiences.
Interesting. So interesting. So you've written this book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, Ancestral Mysteries and Lost Civilisations. I'm going to put this up for everybody to see. There we go. And you've included some photos. We can talk about those when you're ready. So I guess the best place to start is who built it and why?
That's the crux of the matter. It really is. Who
Right.
built Stonehenge and why?
And
People
why?
have been asking that question for centuries,
Right.
the early scholars especially. Who built Stonehenge? Well, all the evidence points to a lost civilization which had elongated skulls. And I photographed at museums, at universities such as Cambridge and Oxfordshire, these incredible elongated skulls of this long lost civilization. And their aDNA, their ancient DNA, points back to that timeline of Stonehenge. So it seems that this incredible race built the first and second phase of Stonehenge, which is a Stonehenge that we're familiar with. And these people were placed into long barrows and various other burial sites. And so when they were unearthed by the early archaeologists, for instance, that was realized that they built them, but it was repressed. This information became repressed by historical societies. So the elongated skulled people got lost to time.
Hmm. So how did you know that it was an ancient civilization? Because I know that they have found burial sites nearby. I just figured I'll just let you take this where you want it because I don't want to leave anything out.
Well, it became apparent that in about 5,500 years ago, in what's called the Neolithic period over here, that there were a ruling elite that had very extended, elongated skulls. They're naturally elongated, for example, but the elite, the rulers, the high priests, the high queens, and the high kings, they use cranial deformation to extend their skulls. So they kind of stood out in society, and then they would rule from these places. And I think with Stonehenge, the other aspect of Stonehenge, you said, why was it built? What was it used for? Was it was for a healing temple, but also also the evidence points to that it was an oracle center, a bit like Delphi is in Greece. People went there, and that was recorded by the very early antiquarians that said people went there to listen to oracles as if they would get answers to the questions that they put towards this ancient power place.
That doesn't surprise me. I imagine you would have, with that sort of energy, that you would have a lot of seers coming from literally, I guess, every part of the land, shall we say, to partake. So, okay, let's me back up a bit. How was it constructed?
How is it constructed? I mean, that's a fascinating question. Most people think the stones of Stonehenge and other megalithic sites in the British Isles, the stones are in the earth. They're not. Where Stonehenge is built on a huge chalk bedrock, and that's, a bit like limestone is to the Giza Plateau in Egypt. So the stones were placed into huge socket holes into solid chalk bedrock. That's how they've stayed up for all of this time. It's very intriguing to say, how did they transport the stones? I mean, some of them weigh in, up to 95 tons, like the Great Trilithon setting, across the landscape for, up to 17 miles. And the smaller blue stones came from Wales up to 170 miles away. So the construction alone was complex because Stonehenge is on sloping ground. It slopes down. So it's not on level ground. So some of the stones had to go in the ground more than others. So a linteled circle across the top like that went perfectly circular. So it was complex. Why on earth build something on sloping ground when you could have flat ground nearby? It's because of all of those different types of earth energies there. That's why they built it there. How they transported the stone, well, that is again one of the mysteries of the ancient world, and theories abound. Each decade, because I've been in this for 3 decades now, each decade brings its own mantra. This decade, for example, it's about sound technology. Before that, it would be they were, transported on earth currents or leys, for example. But I really do feel that the ancients were adept at moving stone. We think it's complex, but it certainly wasn't in the ancient world, because all over the world they were moving massive chunks of rock to build pyramids. How they got there, like I say, theories abound. I think they were using the earth currents, which were associated with ley lines. And when we measured some of the frequencies of earth energies, it came out about 25 hertz. If the ancients could manipulate sound and could manipulate earth energies, which isn't beyond the bounds of possibility, and they could make that 25 hertz a kilohertz, and that's the frequency of levitation, 25 kilohertz. So I think they were manipulating natural energies within the earth to make stones lighter, not fully, hugely light, but lighter than what they would be naturally.
Wow. I love that, because usually you hear, oh, possibly ET and so on. So to hear that,
it's a good old man-made technology, just advanced using what I think you're trying to say is what's already at hand.
That's right, because wherever you have an ancient site across the world, you have earth currents flowing into that. Earth currents, you see, are associated to a ley line. Over here, we see leys differently than in the United States. And we've had 40 years of information about this. So you've got a straight line, a ley, and in coiling that are two earth currents. One is male and one is female. If you imagine the caduceus symbol or a strand of DNA, which is wrapped around, these two earth currents flow around a ley. That's a ley system. That's the power in the land. That's what the ancients were looking for. And those encoiling currents have those frequencies. So that I think they were manipulating what was already to hand and what the earth naturally admits.
Oh, when did we lose that then? When did they say, oh, we're not going to do it this way? We're just, why didn't they continue to use that source of energy to do everything?
Exactly. Well, you see, at the end of the Bronze Age, about 4,500 years ago, for example. So Stonehenge is in its heyday. Yeah, it's pristine. It's looking fantastic. People are coming from near, far, and wide. And then there was climate change. We are going through almost karmically what our ancient ancestors went through. There was massive climate change, and no longer could they go to the stone circles. They had to go on higher ground because the climate had changed. There was more rain and they couldn't grow crops on lower ground, so they went to high ground. That's when the real dark ages began. It was almost like the technology had been forgotten about to some regard. It kind of resurfaced to some regard in the time of the Druids and in the times of the Knights Templar, and the Masons certainly kept some technologies on through their designs of cathedrals. But that was the heyday of ancient technology, the times of Stonehenge and Avebury and other stone circles across Europe.
Much like Göbekli Tepe and many of the other structures that they're starting to find, which would have predated Stonehenge. So it goes to show, like, were they using the same technology? Because if so, that's quite an ancient technology.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe, it's claimed to be 12,000 years old, but I don't think that's one of the oldest sites in the world, because quite close to the world's largest stone circle, Avebury Henge in Wiltshire, about 17 miles north of Stonehenge, you have a massive mound. It is huge. It's called Silbury Hill. And that's been dated orthodox to about 2500 BC. But a colleague of mine, John Cowie, the late John Cowie, he got some carbon that could be carbon dated from the inside of Silbury Hill, and that came back through an independent laboratory to the same time date as Göbekli Tepe, 12,000 BC. So we are kind of thinking that it's the old sites in Turkey that are the oldest sites, but no, I think some of the sites worldwide have the wrong timescale to them. Take Stonehenge. 2 samples of carbon came out of one of the bluestone sockets. Like I said, they were in chalk bedrock. One was dated to 8,000 years ago. One was dated to 4,500 years ago. So the archaeologists chose the younger date. So I think we need to be open-minded and don't just think one site in Turkey is the oldest in the world. That will be changed pretty soon with the latest technology coming through. And we'll find that sites worldwide are on that same timeline.
Absolutely. Right. There's got to be so many that we haven't even found yet.
Exactly. Just because we haven't found all of the ancient sites, a bit like Göbekli Tepe. What happened is, and this happened in Scotland as well, in the British Isles, the ancients would decommission some sites. What do I mean by that? They would bury them in their time scale. So it was almost like they would have an ancient site, then they would place it under the ground. So you're right. Could there be more sites throughout the world? Yes.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, we have whole cities that have gone underwater. We have massive churches that are being dug up from the ground, big temples in the Middle East, and
Mhm.
There's just so much, and I wish we had more lifetime to be able to explore. I wish our lives were longer, because I don't want to pass away not knowing that there is another
But
Stonehenge somewhere waiting.
there's also like technology. I mean, there are
Yeah.
archaeologists who strictly use satellite to be able to find these ancient structures, which is amazing.
Absolutely. And also LiDAR. LiDAR is like a
Yes.
kind of sensitive beam, and I've just been trained in LiDAR.
Very
So
nice.
I will utilize all of my mystical skills combined with modern day technology like LiDAR to find these ancient sites, because LiDAR can penetrate forests in South America, sands in ancient Egypt. So
Yes.
we will start to uncover the ancient world, and it's going to be an exciting journey, one of which I hope to be intimately involved with.
Well, I
Oh,
hope
I
so
hope so
too.
too. We're best friends.
It's
It's
a whole
bad.
other
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
I know. I know. Amelia, can you get this one? Can you see it?
Absolutely. Hi,
Awesome.
Diane. Thank you for tuning in and for contributing. She says they found a new site 8 miles from Göbekli Tepe. It's called Karahan Tepe. What?
21,000.
No,
No,
that's 21.
212.
Yeah.
500. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow,
It's
I
so
haven't heard
close
that.
together. It's hard to read. It's so tiny on my screen, but
Yeah, I don't know. Have you heard about this one at all?
Yes, absolutely. It's been quite widely investigated. Again, you know, the timelines that archaeologists put on these are tentative. It needs to be far, far more widely investigated. It really does. But at the end of the day, all of these sites follow the same Earth energy ground plan. So you could have a site in Turkey, like we've just described, a site in Egypt, like the pyramids, a site in South America, Stonehenge. They were all looking for the same blueprint, which is a massive underground aquifer that generates a high electromagnetic field, and then the leys, and then numerous different types of earth currents. And in the pyramids, let's go to ancient Egypt. Who doesn't like a bit of ancient Egypt? Where
Exactly.
yeah, you've got exactly. Yeah, I agree. You've got the Great Pyramid, for example. Beneath that, you have an aquifer, but the earth currents there is called emergence points. The earth currents come up out of the ground, cobra-like, and they feed a huge energy system. So that's what we see when we're at places like the pyramids or Stonehenge. You have the birthplaces of these amazing earth energies. They're called emergence points to geomancers. And that's what was documented thousands of years ago in ancient China. And they built a science technology around it called feng shui or feng shui, depending on how one pronounces it. So we know that these energies have been documented. And even in ancient America, for example, when you come to a site such as Chaco Canyon, they have emergence points where it's believed by the First Nation peoples that they emerged from those points. They tend to be the power in the land which the ancients looked for. It's a bit like, you know, filling up your car with gas. You're going to go to that gas pump. You know what the gas pump does. It's going to charge your car up with energy. And the ancients were looking for a very similar thing, just in the ground.
Are they purposely placed all over the world in certain directions to correspond with each other?
They do all link up. They do have a kind of understanding of a kind of network that goes all around the world, where you get different sites on different lines that will link. Imagine that you've got some really strong lines around the earth. They're called primary leys and primary earth currents. And then you get lesser lines that link into that. They're called secondary lines, for example. So you get major sites on the primary lines, and then then you get lesser sites on the secondary ones, but they all link in and form these nodal points where you get secondary lines pouring into primary lines, and they create a nexus, and all of that is worldwide. So I think back in the ancient times, for instance, the ancients were fully aware of these global networks and tapped into that, a bit like an acupuncture needle taps into a meridian line.
Wow.
Right. Quick question here while we're there.
Yes, Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for joining us. Has the earth power changed in these sites since those climate changes happen?
That's a really good question, Kathy. I think so. I think the Earth it goes through phases in different ages. When we look back, they have these high points in ancient civilization, high civilization times, when it seems that the energy was paramount. Then it seems to dip down and then come back up. And we must remember that Earth energies are also intimately associated with solar cycles, lunar cycles, planetary cycles, so that there is no separation. Everything is interconnected. So at times like now, we're going through these massive solar storms that have given the aurora borealis in southern England, and I'm sure that's the case in the United States. They stirred into all the male currents and the male earth energy and ley lines, so they become infused. Anything that's solar becomes infused with that. So we need to think about these. In ancient times, they had highs and lows, just like we're having now. We're in a high for all solar energies upon our planet. They link into that energetic phase of the sun.
Well, yeah, you could see, I mean, even strategically building these monuments to do exactly that, or the moon the other way, you know. Other question.
Yes. Hi, Claudette. Thank you for joining us. Wonder if Canada has pyramids not yet discovered.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a great insight, Claudette. This is what I love about people on shows like this. They inspire people. What some people would say, well, that's impossible because they would have been documented by now. No, imagine that, beneath layers and layers of soil, that you could have numerous lost sites. That's where LiDAR, like I said earlier, comes in. So, Claudette, I hope that in future times that Canada will be documented and you will be remembered for saying, well, I was one of the people that said there could be a pyramid beneath that
that's
land.
great, because the internet is forever. The internet is
Right.
forever. Well, because we have the Niagara Falls, that's what I was thinking. With all that power, there has to be something somewhere we haven't seen yet.
There's a lot of ancient cultures that settled there, that's for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. And this is what we need to look to. We need to look to with the natural power centers, even Stonehenge and numerous sites across the British Isles associated with rivers. Some of the avenues lead to a river or a spring. They're very, associated with water. And of course, Niagara Springs, worldwide fame, because it by itself, it's a power center generating energy, which I think the ancients would have tapped into and utilized.
Yeah, it powers all of the east coast of Canada and most of the US.
Wow.
It's quite powerful. It's I know, because we live so close to it and we're always like around it, maybe we don't see it as power. Maybe people think we just take it for granted, but honest to God, I am 55 years old. I could go to Niagara Falls. I'm 40 minutes away and literally still feel that same awe and energetic feeling standing there looking at it as I did when I was a little girl. It just never ceases to amaze me. And I especially like seeing the tourists, through like relatives that come to visit, through their eyes, the way they're looking at it for the first time. The energy it gives off is astounding. It's just incredible.
I think it's fascinating. People don't look at the planet They just see the planet. It's a place that we live on. It's like a floating thing through space. I don't think they realize the power that it yields and everything that goes with it, and how it literally sustains us all. It's just the ancients knew how to tap in to all of this. And I think as we move forward, because time does pass, and a lot of these monuments, like Amelia was saying earlier, and you were saying earlier, become hidden. Things that look like mountains. When you start really delving into it, and you realize that's not a mountain.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree fully. And what I would like to say as well, we've looked at an ancient site such as Stonehenge or the pyramids or Göbekli Tepe. You can go where you like in the world, and you place a megalithic structure on those different types of earth energy. Then, as I have proved many years ago, if you put a standing stone into that, let's call it a meridian line, like in acupuncture, okay, and you put a needle, you put a standing stone into that meridian line, the stone starts behaving in a particular manner and will start to almost absorb that earth energy, then transmit it as an aerial energy. I measured that against standing stones about 15 years ago, or if not more now. I dread to think how long ago that was, but it was proved that that's on certain points on that standing stone, they would emit energy. So what the ancients were doing, they were tapping into that earth energy and then transmitting it in a Wi-Fi network. There was no wires in the megalithic period. Right. So they were utilizing that energy, and that energy can travel quite some distance, as my team and I experimented with. So we're only just beginning to understand the lost technology of the ancients. We're scratching the surface, and you could read book after book after book, but it still doesn't have all of the answers, because I don't believe one author alone has all the answers. It's people coming together. It's people with shared skills, whether that's a mathematician, an astronomer, a geomancer, that's somebody that looks into earth energies. When people come together, they start to understand sites from different skill levels. What's incredible about now in 2024 and 2025 is the moon is in a part of a very grand cycle that only happens every 18.61 years. Okay, so that's when the moon reaches its most northerly in the sky. It can't go any more north, or it reaches its most southerly in the sky. It can't go any further south, and that's called the moon's metonic cycle. And numerous ancient sites worldwide were aligning their sites to that lunar cycle, which infuses those megaliths with energy, and we're in that cycle now. It's called the night of the high moon. A bit like the summer solstice is the longest day of daylight, isn't it? And we're coming up to the summer solstice soon. The night of the high moon is the night of longest moonlight, and it's a time of incredible feminine power, because the moon often in most cultures represents the goddess. So at different ancient sites, from Chaco Canyon to Chimney Rock in Colorado, that's aligned, for example, to that cycle, as was Stonehenge, as was Avebury-Henge. So it's almost now we're in a really exciting time where all of the megaliths are going to be infused with this lunar power that we can tap into. You don't have to physically go somewhere. You can tune into that from afar and look at that ancient site in your mind and feel that energy infusement. Around about the time of the summer solstice, it's going to be powerful for the moonrise, as is the winter solstice as well this year. So be conscious of that sites are becoming a little bit like rebooted. We reboot up our laptops when they kind of fail. Imagine that these ancient sites are going to be rebooted round about the time of this year and next year, especially at the solstices.
Right. And all of these locations are connected in this way.
Absolutely, you're very right, Michelle. So it's going to be a global event with this moon's metonic cycle. Like I say, that is rare, happens roughly every 19 years. And
Wow.
for instance, this summer solstice, you could be in Ireland in a place called Carrickeel. Who's heard of Carrickeel? Not a lot of people, except for the Irish. But they built numerous cairns. That's like mounds of white quartz. They're beautiful ancient sites aligned to this lunar event, as did Stonehenge. So you could go to the most remote places in Ireland, and they too face the direction of this moonrise.
Yeah, I love it. You need to find me in one of these megalithic sites in time. Oh my goodness. So people flock to these places. And Stonehenge, of course, people flock to it. And I know I've had friends who visited. They were there probably about a month before I was there. And so I missed the boat on the whole shot, of course.
They closed it off by the time you got there.
Well, even then you had to, with notice, apply, I guess. They couldn't just show up, let's say, to be able to be inside the circle, like
I
within the
didn't
henge.
know that.
So for people visiting, what would they experience during, let's say, an event like this? Or people who come from all over the world at any given time, why do they flock here? What do they get out of it? Aside from the natural historical beauty, of course.
Yes, what they get out of it, and that's a really amazing question, because I think it's what a lot of people feel. What do I get out of going to these ancient sites? Well, imagine that you know exactly where to stand at Stonehenge, and it would be called the station stones. They're kind of stand a little bit outside of Stonehenge, but are intimately associated with the monument. If you're stood on one of the station stones looking towards another, you're facing that moonrise, and the stones become infused with that energy. For some people, it makes them feel like tingly. For others, it makes them feel warm or cold. And these energies you can literally feel as you're walking around the monument. And like I said, at certain phases of the sun and the moon, they become even more powerful. And that's what people sense. That's what people feel as they move around a monument. They might walk around a particular area and go, oh, I feel something there. That's going to be a power spot there. And most people feel that. You don't have to know about exactly where the energies are. Walk around an ancient site, 360 degrees if it's a circle. And in that 360 degrees walk around, you will feel different things at different points. That's the power of place.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I definitely have had the pleasure of being, as I've traveled many parts of the world, and I always find myself gravitating towards very ancient places. For me, I find a lot of that just, in the Alps, in the mountains, all these different places I travel. I just find that stone itself holds memory, and it resonates, and it has its own frequency. So I tend to wonder if this is why stone placed in certain ways can create not just all of that, which it already can do, or it already does, but if placed in certain ways, can it change that frequency somehow? Can it, hold a bigger or better imprint? I don't really know the right way to put it, but I know that if I'm in the mountains and you can connect just with the energy from the stone, I can't imagine if that's just naturally. I can't imagine, let's say in a cave system, or if you're looking at, again, let's use Stonehenge as we're talking about it. Everything is strategically placed in a way just to enhance the experience, I guess, or absorb the energy from all the people.
Exactly. And you've hit on something again, because where Stonehenge and other sites are on a large volume of water, normally an aquifer, and that's now a geological fact. And esoteric water diviners such as myself and geomants have been saying that, for decades. But it's on a lot of underground water, and homeopaths and many others beside tell us that underground water has memory. It has memory. So when you're at these places, they're like the Akashic record of place. So you can tap into the past at these ancient sites as well, that which went before, because it's almost like the water will record something. Now place stones upon that, for example. Now place people's experiences on top of that. You have a huge understanding of history just by the waters beneath the earth alone.
I know we had a stonemason Sean Williamson, who was on the show from Scotland, and he does everything in very old techniques, nothing new. It's all done by hand. And he had made reference to cathedrals, for example, or how the Knights Templars would build especially round rooms, but how you could sometimes hear music and chanting and choirs just from years and centuries gone by. And scientists have actually tested that just with recorders, putting them in these stone structures and coming out with all kinds of incredible sounds. Has anybody ever tried anything like that at any of these locations?
Absolutely. I mean, in my book, The Secret History of Stonehenge, I cover Dr. Don Robbins' work. He takes that concept the next stage over, so to speak. And he says, as you're tapping into stone, as all the stones at Stonehenge were smoothed, and you're putting in a kind of energy program, so to speak, then you're tapping into it. The crystal lattice structure is kind of like a semiconductor. There's no difference between the lattice structure of a megalith to a semiconductor that comes out of Silicon Valley. They are very, very similar, and both can hold on to memory. So Dr. Don Robbins said at ancient sites such as Rollright, he never investigated Stonehenge. I took his work to Stonehenge, that if you program the stone in a certain way, it will release sound later on, or a corner of the eye fleeting image, for example. So yes, that's why cathedrals, you can hear Gregorian chants in certain areas, and at stone circles even more so than cathedrals, because they're older and they've got much more, historical significance as well. Because what happened with the cathedrals, especially across Europe, the Pope, there's Pope Augustine said, let's build all of the churches on sacred sites, because they wanted to Christianize the pagans that were still, honoring the gods of old. So that's why, you get a lot of the cathedrals on these lays, because they're just adopting former sites that were later Christianized, as were all the festival dates. Like Halloween, that was the Celtic festival of Samhain, November the 1st, the first day of the Celtic New Year. So they all just became Christianized. But going back to sound emitted from the stones, as well, it's believed that if you programmed a stone enough, it could have that corner of the eye fleeting image. When we go back to all of the ancient manuscripts, it links Stonehenge to Delphi in Greece. There is a myth that says that the god Apollo, the healing god of the sun, left Delphi and at the winter solstice, and arrived at Stonehenge, and he occupied Stonehenge. The ancients were talking about if they could see the gods, not pray to a god that's invisible, but could see a god there. And it was said that it occupied Stonehenge. And even some top archaeologists such as Professor Tim DeVille and the late Jeffrey Wainwright, they said that same myth. The gods occupied the sites. So I think the stones were so highly programmed, and because it's a circle and linteled on top, no other stone circle in the world had lintels on the top like Stonehenge. It contained all of that programmed information, and the god Apollo, the healing god, occupied Stonehenge from the winter solstice to the equinox. Then, according to all mythologies, the god departed.
And departed, leaving it as we see it.
Yes, and returned to Delphi in Greece. So when we look at the holy history of place through mythologies, through legends, and the like, we build up a picture of how did our ancestors think about Stonehenge. They said a healing god occupied it. They said all of the stones doth have healing power. And when we look to what English heritage have done to the site, they've disempowered it, because I am in a fortunate position where I'm a second generation master dowser that have inherited the papers of numerous master dowsers that have come into my legacy archive. Going through that archive, I came across the reports of a top curator of Stonehenge dating back to the 1940s, 50s and 60s. He was the curator there. Everybody respected him. He was called Tom Gorey. He was also a custodian of the site. And he said that trilithon number 51 had a hole in it that you could put your whole arm down at one point, sort of going down right into the stone. And miraculously, even in a drought, it would fill up with the purest water, and nobody knew where that water came from. They'd start to think, did it fall down from the lintels? No, it's a sunny day. Did the wind drive it in? No. And people started to queue by that trilithon. And for listeners who are saying, what's a trilithon, Maria? It's two stones with a stone on the top that's found on the inside of Stonehenge. And that used to produce this healing water. So what did the then Ministry of Works that preceded English Heritage do? They filled it up and plugged it up with concrete and plastic. So some of the healing attributes of Stonehenge today have been destroyed in relatively modern times.
Why? Why would they do that? I mean, I know why.
I don't.
Like, I'm just speaking on it, like, and generalizing, because the powers that be, they're not going to give you anything that can heal you. It's just bad for business. But let's hear Maria's answer.
Yes.
Well, it's true. It's absolutely true. When people start to revere something that is mystical, that is magical, that defies science, that defies your rationale way of thinking, but does something supernatural and incredible and changes people's lives, that's when I think the Ministry of Works, that government department, literally thought we need to stamp this out. Because it was, healing people, especially things like eczema, and even what was called then the falling sickness, which was epilepsy. People were queuing to be healed by these stones. So literally it got wiped out because I think it was challenging the perceptions of science, and that cannot be done by the mainstream. They want you to think, oh, I've got a headache, I need a paracetamol. I've got this. I thought I need a pharmaceutical company to heal me. Whereas the ancients were plotting out of these ancient sites for healing and divination purposes, because they can transform your consciousness, and that means they can transform your life.
Right. That tells me that maybe religion had something to do with it as well, because people of strong faith, like Christianity, who were taking over a lot of these places, would not want that. That's a supernatural thing. We can have that, but you cannot have that, right?
Exactly. And the thing about, Orthodox religion is it's dogma. And
Yes.
anything outside of that dogma is, considered almost like paganism.
Mhm.
And the thing is, as well, is when I was studying with a Master Dowser in Italy, northern Italy, there was a point where the bishop would do a certain way of walking around church, because we must remember that in the early cathedrals and the early churches, there were no pews. That came much later. Sitting down in a cathedral or church is a late concept. People
Yeah.
used to walk around it in a processional manner. And if they walked around it in a particular manner, they would get healing as well. But that was only known by the bishop. It's actually called the bishop's run. He's walking, but for some reason it's called the bishop's run. And that expands the aura. And the Knights Templar would do that. The Masons would do that. And the hierarchy of Christianity would do that. So while they're saying to the congregation, wipe out lingering pagan practices, they were actually doing that.
They
So
kept it.
exactly, they kept it. They never wiped it out. They just used these concepts for their hierarchy within their own communities.
I believe that 100%. I believe they kept the best of every place that they amalgamated, into their belief system. They kept the best of the best for everything. Would you agree? And it's just my thoughts, so I'm just going to put it out there. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. So, but I believe that personally, a lot of these churches, or we'll just go Christian. I don't want to just censor them out, because I get hate mail. So, but I do believe that they purposely went over top of these power spots, not just because showing people we're the supreme, we're going on this place you hold sacred. I really do feel they were, harvesting some of that for themselves as well.
Yes, I mean, when we look at, some of the very tall spires on churches and cathedrals, the towers, for example, that can enhance the earth energies sited below it. And like I said, if you know how to use a cathedral, then you can neutralize those energies. You mentioned earlier that some of the Templars had circular rooms. Well, in England, they had octagon-shaped rooms that are even more powerful than the circular ones, all with seats going around it like this, especially in Wells Cathedral. That is on a very high power vortex type of earth energy. And then it's recently been decoded by some sacred geometrists. I cover sacred geometry in my latest book. Then the sacred geometry of Wells Cathedral, which is quite close to Glastonbury in the south of England, that was all made to enhance the energy of Venus. It has a pentagram at the altar, which is the pentagram is drawn out by Venus in the heavens going through her 8-year transits. So at the heart of some of the cathedrals is the great goddess Venus, which again is all hushed in Christianity, because it's the Father, the Son.
That's right.
That's the emphasis. But really, they were adopting Venus in the heavens.
Yes, it was all about goddess worship before Christianity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the women around Stonehenge, they were given preferential burial treatment. So when all of the cremations were looked at that are beneath Stonehenge now in what's called the Aubrey holes, they were predominantly women. So we know that at Stonehenge, there was a strong female priesthood. And when I discovered my first elongated skull, that was a woman dating back 5,500 years ago, that was found in the largest long barrow, that's a burial site in Northwest Europe. So we know that she was a high queen, probably governing the area of Stonehenge.
Can I put up a couple of these drawings that you sent?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Here we go. So this would be an example of an elongated skull.
Yeah,
Now-
that's absolutely. Sorry.
That's okay. So is this from binding, skull binding, or was this, because you know how the ancients emulated what they saw or what they respected or what was unusual? Were there people there? Was it all, skull binding, or was there a civilization that naturally had these elongated skulls?
That's a good question. Yes, they had naturally long skulls in the ancient times across the British Isles and Europe, but some of the elite extended their already long skulls to make them longer. So this is an example from Yorkshire, which is towards the north of England. This is a female. And she had her skull, which was naturally long, extended slightly through cranial deformation. We know that there's cranial deformation because you get two scars here if you've done head binding, and the skulls that were hyper elongated, they definitely showed those signs, but they were all naturally long skulled anyway. So there was two races in the ancient past: the hyper elongated and the lesser elongated. The lesser elongated were naturally long skulled with no cranial deformation.
Very interesting. I'm going to show the next one. Okay, we'll do this again. This is where we need a producer. It's just apparently not here. Here we go. So what are we looking at here?
This is drawn from some measurements given from Oxford University. This is a male from the West Kennet Long Barrow in Avebury, which is the world's largest stone circle. The interesting thing about the hyper elongated and the lesser elongated is their ear placement was much further back in their skulls than our ear placements today. That's the first thing that all the anthropologists remarked on about the long-skulled people. So they could have had like a bit of a mythical look about them, like the fae, fairies or pixies. And maybe that's the origin of some of those myths. Also, by the reports by anthropologists, their ear bones were different to ours. That was commented time and time again. When I gave that report to a doctor I know in London, she works in the accident and emergency department in London, she said, that seems very unusual, almost impossible. And I said, well, if let's go with that report. What would they be able to hear? And she proposed that they would be able to hear other frequencies. So maybe they could hear earth energies or hear megalithic energy or have a different perception about ancient sites through their hearing facilities rather than seeing the ancient site, which tends to be a modern day experience. We look at things.
Isn't that fascinating?
That's the most bizarre skull. I've never seen a skull shaped that way. I've always seen them, because this is new to me, I've always seen them elongated where I've heard people speak of them, but not where it looks almost rectangular.
Yes, and they had a kind of a pyramid point on the top of their head as well. Again, these are all from early reports by anthropologists, and we were using the measurements from those reports as well. And their bodies were a different size to their heads. Our heads are 1/8 of our body. And that's how you would learn if you're an artist, if you were designing clothes, for example. That's how people put our bodies into proportion. But in the ancient world, their heads were elongated and hyper elongated, but they were smaller the size of their body. So they would have looked out of proportion because their heads were 1/10. So even though they had elongated skulls, their faces, when I measured them at universities and museums, they were much more narrower than my face, sometimes like that compared to my face, which is like this. So they were very unusual looking.
Also, I would imagine the compression and that would create it. I wonder if they had any health issues when you think about it. Everything's so different inside as well.
One of the issues that they did face was our skull bones fuse around about the age of 30, averagely speaking. Okay, so they fuse together, and that's how, you know, people can age victims that have been cold cases through the fusing of the sutures. In the elongated skulled people, they fused very early in their lives. So that was one issue. They may have had more of a compression of the skull. And so that could have been one health issue. But generally speaking, when we look to the age of the deceased in the barrows contemporary to their lives, they lived to quite old age because they had organic diets, they had very healthy water, something that we spend more money on today.
Yes.
They had at their disposal. So I think they were, generally speaking, quite healthy and robust.
Yeah, they didn't have the toxic fumes and toxic chemicals going into the water as we do now. Technology is not always a savior.
No, exactly so. And it was pure, pristine waters as well. We have recycled water here. You know, it goes through purification, and it memorizes every single drug anybody has taken. Because, you know, as an esoteric water diviner, it's the one thing that I haven't drunk since about the 1980s is normal tap water.
Oh, no.
Because it's so infused with that memory of anything that's been taken and gone through the system. So yes, they lived a very organic, healthy diet with fresh air as well. All of their elements were pristine. The element of earth was pristine. It wasn't, you know, chemicals of nitrogen put on it. The element of water, the element of air, everything was pristine, really, in those bygone ages.
And
And
they
so
were
have-
much more active. Sorry, Michelle.
You have to really go off the beaten path. When I was traveling, spent some time in Romania in the Carpathians, and I was up high enough that I could literally just take a glass and scoop the snow, or I just scooped the water, and it was just delicious. Just delicious.
Absolutely. I mean, Romania is quite probably in the future of the European Union, it will become one of the organic capitals of the world because it has less fertilizers used than in other parts of Europe. So I see that to be, you know, a kind of future technology coming out of Romania. And in that area of, you know, Transylvania, you have the controversial limestone sphinx that is said to be there as well, which I visited and looked at myself. So again, we can go to any part of the world and start to see these lost wonders that aren't necessarily documented by the mainstream archaeological world.
I think there's a lot of hidden gems. I think they found an ancient library in Romania as well. So if there's any truth to that, I think we could look for great things. Here's a question that I was going to ask, but I was going to include Akhenaten with that. Amelia, can you get this?
Absolutely. Again, from Claudette, she says, Maria, can you verify that Nefertiti Queen
Queen
Nefertiti,
Nefertiti.
was part of the long skull people in Egypt.
And I would include Akhenaten, or were they binding?
Absolutely. I mean, they have naturally long skulls. So yes, Queen Nefertiti, King Tut, Tutankhamun, they definitely had extended long skulls. Now, when I put the Neolithic High Queen, as I call her, the elongated skulled Queen of Stonehenge, next to the that era, of Akhenaten fame, then they are very, very similar, as are the skulls of Malta. They're Malta, Egypt, and Stonehenge. If you put those skulls in a row, they are so similar. So the height was the same as well. The height of Nefertiti, she was only about 4 feet 9 inches tall. The High Queen of Stonehenge their femur bones tell us that they were very, very short as well, but they were moving the heaviest stones. The much, much taller people came in the Bronze Age. That's like 500 years after the heyday of Stonehenge. So we know that the size of the people with long skulls were the same height from Nefertiti to Stonehenge. Definitely. That was an excellent question.
Mm-hmm. So these are
Wonderful.
the only cultures that had these elongated skulls?
Paracas in South America, that has more like cone-head elongated skulls that have been thoroughly investigated by Brian Forrester, for example. He forwarded my book. So yes, you get them all across the ancient world. You get elongated skulls, for example, in France, in Germany, in the Czech Republic, in you mentioned Romania and Transylvania. So really, it was a kind of long lost culture that became literally invisible after the Bronze Age, and that's thought because. For example, you've got the elongated skull people living in England. The much, much taller, and some people would say giants of the Bronze Age came over with disease. And there was a plague around 2500 BC in the British Isles. A bit like when the Spanish went to certain parts of South America, they took disease with them that their culture could handle because their immune system was used to it, whereas an indigenous population can't handle those viruses. And part of that was their demise as well. But the aDNA, the ancient DNA, did survive in the Neolithic, and Professor Ian Barnes recently has noticed that by the Bronze Age, through disease, eventually through intermarriage, that the aDNA got wiped out of the ancient Britons and it became European from the Bronze Age DNA. So all of the DNA has been mapped throughout the south of England and some in Scotland as well.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I didn't know that. I was so curious because we always hear about Egypt and always that way. And I'm thinking, did these people not travel? Of course they had to.
We're going to take a real quick station and sponsor ID.
Oh my gosh. I don't want to.
Wakey, Amelia.
No, it's not that. I'm listening and I'm so fascinated because I'm learning so much. Yeah, this is, like I said, it's very new to me. I know I'm limited on how much I know. I believe our audience in chat knows a lot more than I do about this. So, anyways, you are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 107.7 FM, as well as on the Gulf Coast on 105.3 FM. We're live on the Roku channel and archived as well. Our special guest tonight, all the way from the UK, and it is very early in the morning there. We are so grateful, is Maria Wheatley, and tonight we are discussing megalithic sites and earth energies. We're just discussing elongated skulls. If you're just tuning in, don't worry, because you can stream our archives on any platform that you normally use. Search United Public Radio and then The Outer Realm to find us. Remember to click like and subscribe, add us to your personal playlist so you never miss an episode, and don't forget to share us. Folgers Coffee, we'd like to say thank you so much for your continued support in fully sponsoring our show. We love you, we appreciate you, and we hope this is forever. Right, Michelle? We hope this is forever. I mean, we couldn't do it without you, honestly. Thank you. Our fabulous banner and our promo media that you see is courtesy of Steve McGinnis. He's a horror illustrator, incredible artist. Steve also creates commissioned pieces and can be found on Facebook. Thank you, Steve. Our intro and outro is courtesy of Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, also known as Justin Snicker, award-winning composer, vocalist, and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp and stream him on any platform that you normally use. Find Dr. Snick on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, Justin. You can also search him when you're creating your stories on either platform. Lastly, kindly give us a like, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. Right now, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, please hit like and subscribe. Thank you. Wow, that is such a gorgeous cover. I'm like one of those people who looks at that. No, seriously, if it draws me in, I'm going to buy it. Like, it's just so pretty, and I love holding books. I'm not the digital girl.
So while, I mean, people don't realize that we actually have a much larger international audio listenership since we are an FM station. So there are, millions of people listening. So we like to make sure that when we do our station ID, we find out about your website. People who are watching can see it scrolling, but if you want to give us your website and tell us where to get your book, and we will ask you again at the end of the show.
Sure, thanks for that opportunity. Yes, my websites are esotericcollege.com, which is my teaching platform, and you can learn many different subjects with me, from earth energies to ley lines and other subjects besides. That's esotericcollege.com. And also I have the Avebury, Avebury, the Avebury experience.co.uk. That's where I do a lot of my tours from, to ancient Egypt and, like I said, ancient America. And if you can't remember any of that, just go to mariawheatley.uk. I'm a Brit, mariawheatley.uk, and that's my landing page to go to all of my other websites. And
I love that. I'm a Brit. If we haven't figured out by now, we're in trouble. And just for my USA friends, my American friends, Bury, not Berry. Just saying. I have a thing with Tilbury for the makeup. Everybody's always saying Tilbury. Anyways.
And the book can be found.
Yes, on my website. So go to that. It's always good to support an author direct.
Yes.
Then go through Amazon, that take from me currently 60%.
That's crazy.
I know. So if people go to support my website, that would be absolutely fantastic. And like I said, on my esotericcollege.com, that's my teaching platform. And all of my courses are fully affiliated with the Association of Distant Learning Colleges. It could be taken to diploma level.
Wow. I believe anyone who takes your courses is very fortunate. I find you incredible. You've taught me quite a bit and been so generous. And this last bit of the show, I can't imagine not benefiting from that, even if it's just out of interest, not that they need a certification. Seriously.
Absolutely, because you know what is what I say to a lot of people is that if we look to the ancient past, where how they were living, not just where they were building their ancient sites, but where they were living, that's all being documented from Egypt to ancient Britain, then we can start to see the types of earth energies they were utilizing. For example, there's a particular earth energy pattern called happens to be called a branch spiral or a habitation spiral, the ancients would place their houses upon that, and they would have a healthy lifestyle. They would avoid what's called geopathic stress. What's geopathic stress? It means toxic earth energy in a nutshell. Okay.
Mhm.
So they would avoid the toxic energies that the earth naturally emits, which was documented from the 70s to the 90s across Europe by MDs, doctors, that were saying you should not live above underground water and you should not live above particular grid systems, all of which have been widely documented. The ancients were fully aware of those, avoided that, and built on particular earth energies. Could you imagine today if we have a bit of virgin land and we're going to construct a school, and that we can construct it on particular energies that are going to enhance the children's education? Because what Dr. Kathy Batchelor found in her research of 11,000 homes across Europe was if that children were on what's called the Curry grid, that was discovered by Dr. Manfred Curry in the 1950s, if those children are sited upon that, they become disruptive, their memories are less, and they have educational difficulties. If you go to sleep on that Curry grid, you will become ill over a prolonged period of time, like 5-10 years, sleeping in the same place. So all of this was documented in the 1950s and proven by doctors of worth and merit. And around about the kind of after 1990, it became more and more repressed, so that today we don't even think about the health in our homes. Is our home actually affecting our health? And I also do that remotely and in situ. I go around to people's houses, and what we have been given a legacy from the medical tradition that has been repressed on how earth energies can be used. A woman in a hospital giving birth that happens to be on that particular grid system will have difficulties. Now apply all of that information to setting out a ward in a hospital, to setting out schools where children sit in a school. You're enhancing a community. And that's what the ancients knew. So we can apply all of this. What's a good in a ley line, Maria, and an earth current at Stonehenge?
Yes.
We can apply that to a modern generation to enhance our lives, and it will cut down medical bills as well. So
that's the problem.
Exactly. The pharmaceuticals won't want that. That's why it became repressed.
But that's a tough one, because there are entire, like in Canada, for example, there's like entire provinces that are built like that. It's just on water.
Yeah. That's not good. I mean, you have to have what's called diffusers and a whole load of array.
So what do you do with a situation like that? Can you neutralize that with?
Yes.
Okay, that's the right word here.
I told you we need to bring you here.
I know.
I've said it a few times.
Okay.
Absolutely. What you can do if you think you're above any type of underground water that the water board calls groundwater, you make a copper device. You take 2 pieces of industrial copper, say about a meter long, and then you put that into a vise so that they're taut, and you pull the copper 2 wires together, put them round a drill head. So you're wrapping them around a drill head like that. Slowly put the drill into power mode, and it will like plait it. It will lattice it. Yeah, all around. Then you turn that into a circle, and that's the best type of electromagnetic diffusing device on the market. You could spend a fortune on lots of different devices like orgone. You could spend thousands of pounds, but that device was implemented by George Lakosky, who was working with Nikola Tesla, and that was found to be the best. So you're in good company if you use that.
Can I wear that around my neck and just walk in my yard? Like, I'm not kidding. I'm on water.
Yeah.
No. You want to leave that copper device, that circular copper device, anywhere in your home. It sets up That's it. It sets up an electrical system so that they would start to diffuse it. It's a bit like in the UK. I can't speak for Canada or United States, but if we don't want slugs eating our lettuces or our foodstuffs that we plant in the gardens, we put copper around the
My
poles.
father used to do that.
Exactly,
But
because
copper grounds, right? It's a health thing. It keeps you healthy.
Yeah, but more than that as well, Michelle, if I may add to that, it sets up an electrical device that the slugs don't like. It's setting up an electrical system, around it, because it's a conductor. Copper's a conductor, and that's what that will diffuse your property. So, for example, I live above chalk bedrock. It absorbs underground lunch. So wherever I am in this area, that's what you're going to be faced with. So I have a copper device in my home, just behind the sofa, so it's not going to get knocked around, and then that's it.
Right.
It's such simple things that we can do. And dowsing societies don't advertise this because they'd rather get the commission on devices that they sell you that cost a fortune.
Yes.
Right.
It happens in the paranormal field too.
It happens in every field.
Yeah. Money seems to rule, and that's why I believe that we're failing with our health and everything else, because honestly, they don't want you to be able to heal yourself when they're making all kinds of money on stocks and things like that. And the politicians are running all of that.
Backtrack one quick minute before we lose this one.
Sure, no problem. Kathy says, on Ancient Aliens, they said that King Tut's sister went to Scotland during a turbulent time.
Yes, that's a really good point, Kathy. And it wasn't just on Ancient Aliens, may I say. I mean, that has been documented in the British Isles in mythology for, century after a century. Yes, she was alleged to have gone to Scotland. There's many place names that tend to relate to Egyptian names, and that she was basically made Scotland her home. And what we notice in the south of England, because obviously Scotland is way, way up north, when we go to the Stonehenge area, which I think, I don't just think it was Scotland. Why do I say that? Because when you look to the round barrows, that's burial mounds, and people were interned into that, you find beads that were made in Egypt. They're called faience beads. They're a beautiful, stunning blue, and they were found there. So I don't think it was just Scotland. I think the Egyptian culture came over to the south of England as much as the north. And also we were importing in the Stonehenge area amber from Estonia, and other substances besides. And also they were using opiates made and grown in the Mediterranean. So they were having changes in their consciousness. So when we think about, Scotland and the legacy of Akhenaten, if I may say so, that's that part. But I don't think it was just that. I think it was way, way in Stonehenge as well. That's less documented because people don't have that information to hand.
Right.
Do we ever hear anything about in the Viking areas and, way back with Egypt as well, or with stone, with power? Like, I never hear anyone speaking of Norway or Iceland or Denmark.
The Viking era, which was at its height around the area in which I live, was about the 9th century AD, for example, and historians call them the Danes, but they are the Vikings. They had a lot of power stones that they would carve with runic symbols, for example, and they came over to England and had a lot of strongholds in England, but they traveled near, far, and wide because there's a burial in Norway which was always believed to be a male warrior because he was, with 2 horses. One was a stallion, one was a mare, a lot of weaponry. And then somebody pointed out, the pelvis looks a bit like a woman. Oh, it can't be a woman because it's around all of this weaponry. She's called the Lady of Burqa. And eventually, this was in 2017, may I say, it just got discovered that she was a woman, the Lady of Burqa. But with her and other artifacts around other parts of Scandinavia, they had, again, things from Egypt. They had gold from parts of the Mediterranean. So when we look at cultures, they're not isolated. They are totally, in communication with other aspects of the ancient world. And
they're intermingling, contrary to what many people of modern times believe. They got around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And in my ancestry, on my mother's side, it's Viking and mixed with Celtic on my father's side. So the Celts and the Vikings, very close to my heart and my blood.
Absolutely. And I think that it should be spoken of more. I feel like their history is not out there enough.
No, it isn't. And their culture isn't either, because it's often thought with the Vikings, they're just maraudering barbarians that went around, slaughtering the Anglo-Saxons in England. But their cultural background is one that is intimately artistic, very based as well on a shamanic understanding of the natural world and how to utilize those supernatural forces of nature, which they personified in their gods, for example. So I think, they have much to offer, especially the Icelandic traditions of herbalism, for instance, and how to work with herbs from a Viking point of view. It is one of the lost wonders of the ancient world. I agree with you fully.
I think it's so sad. I don't know. I feel it's sad.
A lot of information is suppressed from all sorts of cultures, and I'm sure, I find that the universe has a wonderful way of bringing everything to light. So we're slowly inching up. We won't keep you super long. I know it's getting, it's already very late. So the last question, biggest, when you mention ancestral mystery of Stonehenge, what in your opinion is one of the biggest mysteries that maybe you've just discovered, or maybe that you think is yet to be discovered?
That's a great way of thinking. I love the way you think. Well, yes. What is out there? I really do think, that there is so much more to be discovered. We're only just scratching the surface, because up until 2015, which is relatively recent, that's when I first discovered some of the elongated skulls. They'd never been documented except in little snippets of reports by anthropologists. So it took someone like me to introduce the world to the elongated skulls of Stonehenge. And and that's just, like I say, it's scratching the surface. And I think as well about ancient America, for example, there is hardly anything known about the earth energies there and the lays, which I'm starting to document from America's Stonehenge right the way through to Chaco Canyon. And when we look at the mythologies of whether it's ancient America or ancient Britain, therein lies clues. It's like, a cold case, coming across a cold case and going,
that I understand.
I've got this skull there. I've got this bit here. And you're trying to piece it together. How did they move the stones? Were they using different technologies? I think we can really look towards this and remember that the ancient civilizations were human as well. I mean, there's been documented about, ET influences, but these were humans as well. Our ancestors that used these ancient sites for healing and for oracles. So we go back with them in our own DNA all the way back to the ancient past. And when you're touching a stone, a standing stone, you're touching that very same monument that our ancestors did. So I think they allow us to go back to the past, to bring that knowledge, like I said, to our future for our children's children to live in harmony with the earth and her energies.
Well said. So we know that there's more to be uncovered. Would you use, or have you tried supernatural ways of getting information?
Absolutely. I mean, that's
Right.
that's how I found the elongated skulls. I was using dowsing, but on a different level. Instead
Right.
of just asking questions and information dowsing, I turned it on its head and asked the landscape, show me what you want me to find. And
Yes.
then I got, I was using what's called a map and a particular methodology of doing it. And then I just kept coming to this long barrow. So I thought, I've got to go to this long barrow. And then bingo, after much ado, I discovered the elongated skulls. And I do tarot. I do a lot of kind of skill base. Even past life regression. I was Dolores Cannon's tour guide for many, many years.
Very nice.
For example, and what a privilege when I look back to work with such an amazing, grounded woman. So I use a lot of different skills to understand the ancient past, and probably a bit like you two, you just use your intuition, your sense of who you are in the landscape as well. That's very important. What do you feel about the landscape? What are you picking up at a particular point? And all of this adds to my cauldron of wisdom, and I put in lots of different skills into that cauldron to try and understand the ancient past.
I love it, because you don't limit yourself. I think we are part of this universe. Energy-wise, we are part of this planet. We're dowsing rods ourselves. We're energy. We react to energy. So informative. I'm just so thrilled that you came on and connected a lot of dots, and also versed us all on so many other amazing things. Again, now, your books, where to get them, websites.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, my websites are esotericcollege.com, and my books are available from all of my websites, which is esotericcollege.com, the Avebury, AVEBURY, the Avebury experience.co.uk, or just go to mariawheatley.uk. That's my landing platform for my other websites.
Fantastic. And I have everything in the show write-up as well, the description. So wherever they go to find it, it'll be in all of the archives as well. And I just would love to do this again. Just, you have another book coming, or what you have coming up? How can we bring you back in here, reel you back in? But we do pre-records as well, because I hate to see you up at 2 a.m. Not that we're not grateful, but it's just
no.
difficult.
Oh my gosh, I am just so amazed by you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of it, your generosity with all of your information, your passion, and I wish only the best for you, and I hope that you keep discovering things, because we need you out there and we need you to teach. You are incredible.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch.
Okay,
thank you for joining us.
Sleep well.
Thank you. Yes, sleep well. Hey, good night. Well, everybody, you have come to the end of another fantastic segment. What can I say? It was just an amazing show. It's just so full of knowledge, but just as I knew she would be, she came highly recommended. And boy, am I glad that she was able to fit us into her schedule. So tomorrow night, guys, we have open mic night.
Woohoo!
I know. Woohoo, indeed. Open mic night. And I've already got things that, I want to address, because, we've got things that are in the news, paranormally speaking. We've got stuff going on. So get your questions and comments together. Meet us in the chat room, and let's just have some fun with this, because there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be discussed, darn it. And we're just the ones to do it. Yeah, I know. And we didn't get a Q&A, right? Like in May. So this one here is just
Building.
that's right. It's been building. That's exactly right. So anyway, have a terrific night. And for those of you guys who are on the other side of the pond, then wait it up. Happy slumber. And we shall see you all tomorrow. So good night.